My graduation dinner was supposed to be nothing more than a quiet formality. A couple of photos, a basic meal downtown, my parents pretending for a single evening that we were a picture-perfect family. But 10 seconds after we sat down, the illusion shattered. My grandfather, the only person who'd ever looked at me with real pride, lifted his glass and said to me, "Lisa, are you finally using the $850,000 I saved for your education?" My aunt's fork clattered onto her plate. My parents went stone still. And I felt the floor tilt beneath me. $850,000? I had never heard of any fund. Before I explain how everything collapsed, tell me something. Where are you watching from? And when you hear what came next, ask yourself, what would you do if you discovered your entire future had been taken from you without your knowledge? Growing up, my family looked stable to anyone standing outside the walls. Inside, it felt like I was living in a house built on uneven ground. My sister Megan was the one my parents believed in. The golden child. The one they were sure would succeed. They never told me I wouldn't. They just never bothered to say I would. And that silence shaped me more than they realized. By middle school, the pattern was set. Megan received chances. I received chores. When she struggled in math, they found her a tutor. When I struggled, they said it would build character. She got a used car at 16. I got a planner and a speech about being resourceful. I didn't hate them then. I just wondered why needing help made me feel like an inconvenience. College only widened the gap. I worked shifts at a cafe, memorizing regulars' orders between classes, while juggling a stack of student loan papers that never seemed to shrink. My clothes always smelled like coffee beans, and my sleep schedule barely existed. Whenever I hinted that I needed help, books, rent, anything, Mom sighed dramatically. "Lisa, honey, you know money's tight." Dad would nod like someone had pressed a button on him. But somehow money was never tight when Megan needed something. Support for her apartment deposit. Help fixing her car. Later, funding for a business idea that turned into a year-long project she never finished. Every time I tried to bring up the imbalance, I felt childish. Petty. Like maybe I really was asking for too much. I kept telling myself I could carry everything on my own. I believed it until the night everything snapped. There were signs before that, small ones, quiet ones. Like the day I stopped by my parents' house and saw an envelope with my grandpa's name sitting on top of a box of old holiday decorations. Before I even had time to flip it over, Mom swooped in and grabbed it, shoving it into a drawer she always kept locked. "Just old documents. Don't worry about it," she said with a smile stretched too tight. Something felt wrong, but I swallowed the feeling like I always did. Grandpa lived in another city, soft-spoken and steady. Every birthday card he ever sent me ended with the same handwritten line. "Keep going. I believe in you." I never knew he'd done more than encourage me. I never knew he'd trusted my parents with something massive, something meant for me. And I had no idea why, on the night of my graduation dinner, my dad kept glancing at the restaurant door the way people do when they're bracing for something to blow up. The weeks leading up to graduation felt strange, like my family's rhythm was suddenly offbeat. Mom kept watching me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Quick, anxious looks she tried to cover with fake smiles. Dad started asking questions he'd never bothered with before. How much rent I paid, how many hours I worked, whether I was managing everything okay. Felt less like concern and more like surveillance. I brushed it off. I thought maybe they were finally proud of me. Then Megan rolled into Sunday lunch with a brand new SUV. Leather seats, huge touchscreen, all the extras. When I asked how she could afford it, she tossed her hair and said her business venture had finally taken off. She didn't explain, and Mom quickly changed the subject, complimenting anything she could point at just to keep me from circling back. I didn't push, but something inside me simmered. A few days later, I stopped by their house to return a mixing bowl. In the garage, that same strange box was pushed behind camping gear. And sitting right on top, another envelope with my grandfather's name printed clear as day. I reached for it. Mom practically teleported across the garage, grabbed it, and shoved it into a cabinet. Her voice shook as she said, "It's misplaced paperwork. Don't touch it." That was the first time I felt something inside me twist hard enough to make my chest ache. That night I tried studying, but my mind kept circling back. Why was Grandpa's mail in their garage? Why hide it? Why lie about it? Then came the night before graduation. My parents were arguing in the kitchen, tense, hushed voices vibrating through the walls. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but one sentence from my dad cut straight through me. "We can't hide this forever." Mom snapped back. "She doesn't need to know. Megan needs stability." Stability. Megan's stability. Always at my expense. I sat awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling while everything I'd ever believed about my family unraveled thread by thread. For the first time, I wondered if the problem wasn't that they couldn't help me, maybe they refused to. By morning I felt hollow. But clear. Something was being kept from me. Something big. And whatever it was, my parents were terrified I'd find it. I promised myself I wouldn't push. Not until after graduation. But I didn't know the truth would explode before I even finished my dinner. I had been craving a single day of quiet. A moment where I didn't have to carry the weight of being the daughter caught between obligation and disappointment. But tranquility didn't greet me. Something else had already arrived. Graduation morning, which should have been full of promise, instead pressed down on me with a heaviness I couldn't shake. Mom knocked on my door earlier than I expected, her voice artificially bright. "Excited?" she asked, like she was forcing light through a shuttered window. Dad lingered behind her, pretending to scroll on his phone, though I could tell the screen was off. A strange tension hung in the hallway, thick and unyielding. I tried to tune it out, tried to focus on the ceremony ahead, but every instinct told me something was off. At the campus, Megan seemed unusually radiant, insisting on taking pictures with me. She draped an arm over my shoulder and said, "Big day for you, sis." The sweetness in her voice felt performative, as though she were acting for some invisible audience. When she stepped back, Mom immediately fussed over her, adjusting her hair and praising her outfit, completely ignoring that it was my day. A familiar sting pricked at me, but I pushed it down. I wanted this day to celebrate my achievement, not their endless comparisons. After the ceremony, my parents insisted on going straight to the restaurant. Dad kept checking his watch. Mom smoothed her blouse repeatedly. Megan's eyes were glued to her phone as if waiting for a message. I assumed it was impatience or hunger, but the truth was darker. They weren't rushing for me, they were rushing to prevent something from happening. Once we arrived, I understood immediately. Grandpa was there, seated near the back, smiling warmly when he saw me. I hadn't expected him. The moment Mom noticed, her face tightened. Megan froze. Dad let out a sharp, nervous laugh. The air shifted, suddenly electric, and I felt it in my bones before my mind could catch up. Grandpa hugged me, his voice warm as he whispered how proud he was. It grounded me, gave me a small island of calm amid the tension swirling around the table. Still, the unease was unmistakable. Mom fiddled with her napkin. Megan whispered to Dad, who shook his head. My instincts screamed that whatever secret they were hiding was tied to Grandpa, and it was about to surface. During appetizers, Grandpa asked gentle questions about school and work. I answered, grateful for the small normalcy. But when he asked about my student loans, Mom froze mid-bite. Megan's eyes widened. Dad cleared his throat. The air thickened. Everyone at the table seemed to hold their breath. Grandpa's expression shifted subtly, and I felt a small collapse inside me. A quiet snap, like a bridge losing its keystone. Something was hidden, and I wasn't going to let it remain a mystery. Instead of shrinking away, I observed. Every flicker of fear on Mom's face, every strained smile from Dad, every restless twitch of Megan's fingers, I cataloged them silently. I didn't ask yet, but the part of me that always accepted confusing explanations had vanished. A steadier, sharper version of me had emerged, ready to confront whatever truth they were guarding. By the time the entrees arrived, the table's energy felt charged and dangerous, far from celebratory. Mom barely touched her plate. Dad wiped his glasses repeatedly. Megan scrolled through her phone, feigning boredom while sneaking glances at Grandpa. Everyone except me seemed to know a storm was brewing. Grandpa cut into his salmon slowly, his gaze drifting between my parents with a calm that only made their tension more apparent. He asked about my plans, my work, the apartment I had been saving for a loan. I answered honestly, my throat tight. My parents were quiet, restrained, waiting. Then Grandpa set down his napkin, straightened in his chair, and lifted his glass. His smile was warm, but his eyes were sharp. He looked directly at me, not my parents or Megan, and said softly, "Lisa, I need to ask you something important." The words hit like a weight. Even Mom's breathing stopped. Grandpa held the glass, finishing slowly. Are you using the $850,000 I set aside for your education? The restaurant seemed to vanish around us. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. Then a loud metallic clatter, the sound of my aunt dropping her fork, echoed across the room. Heads turned. Dad's smile froze. Mom's face drained of color. Megan's phone slipped in her hand. I realized I didn't recognize my own voice when I finally spoke. It sounded distant, underwater. You don't know. Grandpa's eyes narrowed, his warmth hardening into sharp focus. He turned to my parents. You didn't tell her? Mom shook her head violently. Dad, we told her a long time ago, she stammered. You didn't, I said quietly. Never. Grandpa's gaze sharpened. The bank shows the money's been drawn for months. Large withdrawals. None of it came from you. Dad's protest died in his throat. Mom's fingers shook so badly the napkin fell to the floor. Megan's phone dimmed in her grip. I stared at them, my heartbeat hammering. Grandpa leaned forward. The fund has been used but not by you, he said quietly. The words cut through the room like lightning. Dad tried to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Megan looked at her phone as if it could answer. And I realized, nothing would ever feel the same again. No, Grandpa said sharply, and silence fell over the restaurant again. His voice was low, controlled, but every word carried fire. I double-checked everything, called the bank, verified every transaction, asked who had accessed the account. The answer was always the same. Not me. Mom clutched her hand over her mouth like she was about to faint. Grandpa turned to me, jaw tight. Lisa, did you ever authorize anyone, your parents, anyone, to act for you? Did you sign anything? I whispered. Never. Not once. Megan shifted in her chair, the floor creaking under her movement. Her voice came out thin, forced. Grandpa, maybe the bank made a mistake? They make mistakes all the time. Remember. One look from Grandpa silenced her immediately. His gaze then turned to my parents, sharp and relentless. Tell me the truth. Now. His words were not a request, they were an order. Dad's shoulders slumped. Mom squeezed her eyes shut, unable to meet his. Megan glanced between them, waiting for someone to clean up the mess she clearly knew existed. Finally, Dad spoke, voice trembling. We didn't have a choice. Megan needed help. Megan snapped toward him. Dad. We had to tell him, Dad continued, shaking. The truth, it's time. Grandpa's expression hardened. Tell me what? Mom broke first. Tears streamed down her face. We thought Lisa didn't need it. You weren't around to see. Megan, she needed support. She was struggling, and we wanted to help her. I wasn't around because I trusted you, Grandpa said quietly. I trusted you to protect what was hers. Megan slammed her hand on the table. Why does it matter? It's still family money. My stomach turned. Family money? I asked. For what exactly? Silence. Then Dad muttered. For her condo, her car, some business costs, groceries, bills, emergencies. Emergencies. I repeated, voice sharper now. You mean spa trips, furniture shopping, things she wanted, not needed? Mom cried harder, not from guilt, but from being exposed. Grandpa's voice trembled with controlled anger. You stole from your own daughter. You stole from me. And you lied. Megan tried again. Grandpa, stop. I'm your granddaughter too. Don't act like I don't matter. Grandpa turned to her, his gaze cold. You matter, but not more than your sister. Not at the expense of her future. Dad reached out, pleading. We plan to pay it back. No, Grandpa interrupted, voice steady but unyielding. You plan to hide it forever. He stood suddenly, the chair scraping loudly across the floor. Every head in the restaurant turned. Mom whispered. Please don't do anything rash. Grandpa looked at me. Lisa, you're coming with me tomorrow. We're going to the bank together, and then we're seeing my attorney. Mom gasped. No, please. Grandpa pointed at her, his hand trembling with anger. You had years to think about consequences. Now you face them. Dad sank into his chair, defeated. Megan's eyes flicked between us, panic rising. This isn't fair. I needed that help. Why can't she just work like she always does? The truth hit me like a cold wave. I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't collapse. I just sat there feeling a steady clarity settle inside me. A place that recognized betrayal for what it was. Grandpa placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You deserved a future. They took it from you. But I will make it right. Mom wept openly. Dad stared at his untouched plate. Megan glared at me as if my very existence had ruined her life. For the first time I didn't flinch. I met their eyes and said, I will not let anyone take anything else from me. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder. You won't have to. The fragile mask of our family shattered under the soft glow of the restaurant lights. The next morning I met Grandpa outside the bank. He looked older, wearier, but steadier than anyone I'd ever known. Inside, the bank confirmed every withdrawal, every signature, every pattern. It all pointed directly to my parents. Grandpa immediately froze the accounts and requested detailed statements. Then calmly he scheduled a meeting with his attorney. No yelling, no threats, just unwavering insistence on accountability. At the attorney's office, I discovered the full scope. The account had been nearly emptied. Condo payments, a car, months of spending on things that had nothing to do with me. The attorney outlined the steps for restitution, documentation, and a new fund, under my name alone, fully protected. That evening, Grandpa sat with me in my small apartment. He apologized, not for their betrayal but for trusting the wrong people. I told him he owed me nothing. The pain wasn't his. For the first time in years I felt steady, not because everything was fixed but because the truth was finally mine. In the following weeks, my parents called repeatedly, apologized, rewrote the story countless ways. I didn't argue. I simply stepped back, letting distance do the work that truth had already begun. Grandpa's fund gave me stability. His honesty gave me something even more important, the right to protect myself.